All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Happy Brain Chemicals. So today we're going to be talking about the chemicals, more specifically the neurotransmitters that are used in your brain to make you feel happy. All right, so what is a neurotransmitter? A neurotransmitter is a chemical used by your nervous system to send a signal. Sometimes that signal is to a muscle to make it move, or in our case, it's to a brain to make you feel something. So how that whole process works is your brain will send a neuron a signal, which will then depolarize the neuron and cause calcium ions to float around. Those ions are then detected by vesicles, which are little sacs that hold the neurotransmitters, and then they'll release the neurotransmitters into the space between the sending neuron and the receiving neuron. Those neurotransmitters are then picked up by the receptors, and the receptors will then, once they detect the neurotransmitter, will make you feel something, whatever the neurons is supposed to make you feel. And then through thermal vibrations, the neurotransmitter will kind of shake itself out of the receptor, and some of it will flow back into the sending neuron, where it will be either recycled into and deactivated, or it will be put back into vesicles to be used for a later time. So what does that deactivation process look like for a neurotransmitter? Well, once that neurotransmitter goes back into the sending neuron, it interacts with a chemical known as monoamine oxidase, or MAO, and that's an enzyme that helps the neurotransmitter undergo oxidative deamination, where basically the amine group is snipped off and replaced with either a ketol or an aldol or a ketol or aldol acid. And this basically deactivates the neurotransmitter so that it no longer fits inside the receptor and thus can no longer send its signal. This also creates ammonia as a byproduct, but it is not a deadly amount of ammonia, obviously. So one general application of this fact that neurotransmitters go through oxidation is that we can create antidepressants. So one cause of depression is that your receptors are not getting enough neurotransmitters to signal you to be happy. So what we can do is attach a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or MAOI, to the monoamine oxidase. And so this blocks the neurotransmitters from attaching, and thereby they don't get disabled, and they continue on their way out of the sending neuron and onto the receptor, where they will be reused and make you feel happy again. And thus, uh, your neurotransmitters are getting reused multiple times, and you don't have to make any more of them. And so now that I've gone kind of over the general idea of neurotransmitters and one application of them, we're going to go into some specific examples of neurotransmitters.
One of the major neurotransmitters is dopamine, or the pleasure chemical of the brain. Dopamine is special in that it can act as an excitatory or inhibitory neurotransmitter dependent on where in the brain it binds to receptors, meaning it can either increase or decrease the neurons firing in the brain. Most importantly, dopamine is the mood regulating chemical messenger of the brain. High levels of dopamine generally correspond to happier lives, boosted mood, confidence, and focus. Dopamine levels that are too high can lead to a dopamine storm, which causes extreme side effects such as hallucinations, delusions, and psychosis. Low levels of dopamine generally correspond to a lack of energy, motivation, and focus. Constantly low levels can lead to depression. There are many drugs, medicinal and illegal, that are used to boost dopamine production or give the brain more of a dopamine rush. Some of these drugs have similar structures as dopamine, which could explain their effect on dopamine levels. Dopamine is produced in brain cells from a precursor called tyrosine. Tyrosine is hydroxylated by a specialized enzyme and produces another precursor called levodopa, aka L-dopa. This process is an aromatic substitution reaction to add a hydroxyl group onto the ring. L-dopa decarboxylates into dopamine, and the dopamine is stored and released when needed. Tyrosine and L-dopa are both aromatic amino acids that are specialized to the production of dopamine. There are many drugs that are designed to increase the dopamine levels in the brain or boost the release of dopamine. L-dopa, the precursor to dopamine in the brain, is a medicinal drug used by many Parkinson's disease patients that increases the L-DOPA levels in the brain. People with Parkinson's generally have much lower levels of dopamine due to abnormalities in their brain function, which makes them require an alternate source. L-DOPA is administered to Parkinson's patients to quickly increase the production of dopamine in the brain. As stated previously, L-DOPA is a precursor to dopamine, only differing in the carboxyl group which detaches during the conversion to dopamine. Other drugs have very similar structures to dopamine, such as methamphetamine, which causes massive amounts of dopamine release in the brain. L-DOPA and methamphetamine differ in that L-DOPA increases the level of a precursor to dopamine in the brain, while methamphetamine boosts the release of dormant dopamine to overwhelm the receptors, producing a high.
Adrenaline. In the world of chemistry, adrenaline is more commonly known as epinephrine. Adrenaline is a neurotransmitter responsible for the effect known as adrenaline rush. The structure of adrenaline is closely related to that of dopamine and noradrenaline, since they all are catecholamines. Epinephrine is a catecholamine because its chain contains both a benzene ring with two hydroxyl groups attached to it and an amine group. Substituted amines are widely known for having massive biological effects on the body, which is evidently present in catecholamines. This one makes all of them important neurotransmitters in the brain. How to synthesize adrenaline. This is a great example of a lot of the organic chemistry we learned this semester. Adrenaline can be synthesized by the reaction of pyrocatechol with chloroacetyl chloride, which is an acid-catalyzed aromatic substitution, and makes for a great tongue twister. After, the new product is reacted with a methylamine, leading to the acylation of the chloride. Then the ketone in the structure is reduced to an alcohol, forming a chiral center and giving a racemic mixture. Also, adrenaline shares a lot of similarities with noradrenaline, another neurotransmitter, and the only way to distinguish them is through their structure. Adrenaline has a secondary amine, while noradrenaline has a primary amine, and the two can be easily differentiated based on amine chemistry. How can we use this chemistry? In our bodies, adrenaline is produced both as a neurotransmitter and a hormone. These are responsible for such things as the adrenaline rush or the fight or flight response in our body. The most widely commercial use of adrenaline is in the form of the EpiPen. This product has become a billion-dollar industry today. The EpiPen was first developed as a necessity of war, similar to a lot of the real-life orgo we have learned. Developed in 1973 by the demand of the Pentagon, it was first called the Nerve Agent Antidote Kit, and it was used to fight against nerve gas. Today, it's used to fight against severe allergic reaction or cardiac arrest, and we're really lucky to have access to such a life-saving chemical.
Drugs can cause serious changes to a person's brain. Some drugs cause hallucinations and confusion, while others cause increased heart rate and agitation. One of the reasons these symptoms occur is due to serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in regulating a person's mood and sleep cycle. People whose brains do not produce enough serotonin can be anxious, depressed, or be unable to sleep. Serotonin is directly linked to the sleep cycle, as it is a precursor to melatonin, which of course promotes sleep. On the other hand, if one's brain contains too much serotonin, typically due to the use of external enhancers, increased energy and general discomfort follows. Serotonin was discovered in 1949 by an Italian man named Vittorio Erspamer. He named the molecule enteramine because it was a monoamine that was mainly found in the enteric nervous system. This name was later changed to serotonin because it was discovered to be a blood serum agent that affects vascular tone. Serum became sero and tone became tonin. More recently, a connection has been made between serotonin and mental illnesses, and this research continues in an attempt to help those suffering from these illnesses. The body naturally produces serotonin. It starts with the amino acid tryptophan, which reacts with tryptophan hydroxylase through an aromatic substitution reaction, where a hydrogen attached to the aromatic ring is replaced with hydroxyl group. This results in 5-hydroxytryptophan. Next, this molecule reacts with 5-hydroxytryptophan decarboxylase, where the carboxylic acid group is completely removed, forming serotonin. The proper name for serotonin is 5-hydroxytryptamine. There are multiple drugs that alter serotonin levels in the brain. These include LSD, psilocybin, and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. The first two are illegal hallucinogens that distort reality and lead to confusion, which can be caused by greatly increased serotonin levels in the brain. These increase the serotonin levels in the brain by blocking the serotonin receptors, resulting in more serotonin in the extracellular space. Although slightly more complicated, LSD and psilocybin share common structural traits with serotonin, and the serotonin receptors accept these molecules instead of serotonin. The most noticeable similarity is the aromatic ring connected to a heterocycle. SSRIs are common antidepressants, as low serotonin is linked to depression. These function similarly to LSD and psilocybin by blocking the reuptake of serotonin to the receptors, but they are not as strong. This difference in strength could be due to the benzene ring linked to a heterocycle with oxygen rather than a nitrogen. There are multiple serotonin receptors, but some may not accept this altered heterocycle.